What's up, everybody, man? Back. Welcome to a brand new video, and today we are doing episode 40 of Godzilla-Thon. There's no better way to celebrate 40 episodes of Godzilla-Thon than with Godzilla Minus One. That's right, today we're taking a break from the Monsterverse to jump back over to Japan to see what Toho's been up to in the meantime since Shin Godzilla, and to talk about Godzilla Minus One. To celebrate Godzilla's 69th and 70th anniversary, as Toho decided that this is the 70th anniversary Godzilla film, to celebrate, it truly is the 69th anniversary, that's when it came out, Toho released the 37th Godzilla film and the 30th live-action Toho Godzilla film, which they consider this the 30th film of the Godzilla series. This was brought to us from a longtime Godzilla fan and always Sunset 2 director Takashi Yamazaki, who also directed Godzilla the Ride. And this movie was made with a pure love for Godzilla. Through reports and interviews with Takashi Yamazaki, we've learned that Godzilla Minus One's been in the pipeline for a very long time. Toho's approached Yamazaki about it even before Shin Godzilla was made, and Yamazaki turned it down because he knew his VFX company, Shirogami, couldn't compete with the current visual effects industry, and also because he knew that they needed to wait for them to have the technology so that he could pull off the vision he had in his head. This is the first thing that makes this movie so special. This is the first ever Godzilla film with the same writer, director, and visual effects supervisor. You know, back in the day throughout Godzilla's history, you'd typically have a writer like Shiro Kayama, Shinichi Sekizawa, or whoever else. Then you'd have the director, for this example we'll just say Ishiro Honda, and then you'd have the special effects director. This was an entirely different director working with an entirely different crew on basically an entire different studio, and that was Eiji Tsuburaya. This is the first time it's all been under one roof with Takashi Yamazaki. Even in the modern day, you'll have like a director, but then you'll also have the VFX directors, and they're different people. A lot of the Monsterverse directors, for instance, don't understand the VFX workflow. They don't work with it directly. Gareth Edwards, of course, did, but not all of them do. And so they leave that in the hands of the VFX studios, and that's shipped out across multiple studios. With Shin Godzilla, it was a little different situation. You had a co-director with Shinji Higuchi and Hideaki Anno, Shinji Higuchi handling the special effects sequences. So it's a little more of an even thing, where it was a co-director this time. But Godzilla Minus One is the first Godzilla film to be unified under one creative lead, and I think that really shows, because this movie really is a love letter from one man, and you feel it. You feel that this is a creative vision that is unified across one person. I feel like it has a level of cohesion that most Godzilla films do not. This is also the first Godzilla film that's set pre-1954. Of course, that's partially why the title is Minus One, and this was released on November 3rd, 2023 in Japan, and on December 1st, 2023 in the United States. It was the fastest turnaround between a Japanese release and an American release for a Godzilla film as well, so that was pretty cool as well. It's also the first Toho Godzilla film that they themselves handled the international distribution for. Lots of firsts with this movie. This is also the Godzilla movie that I would say at the moment I am the most familiar with. It's not technically the one I've seen the most, just because like throughout my lifetime I've seen other Godzilla movies more. Of course, because those other movies have been around for so many more years than Minus One, they have the advantage in that department. Especially considering I do a little Godzilla-thon pretty much every single year, and by watching all the Godzilla films every year, I'm particularly exposed to the early Showa era, as those are the ones that I definitely make it through, as sometimes I don't always make it through my Godzilla-thons, but I always make it through the early Showa era, and so I'm really familiar with those early Showa era films, and I've seen them so many more times just because I've had way more years with them. But Godzilla Minus One is probably the Godzilla film I've watched the most in the shortest time span, and it's the one that I've spent the most time with as of the past few years. As of 2023, this is the Godzilla movie I've spent the most time with, and it's actually really refreshing, because normally when that happens I get really burned out on the movies. Of course, I spend a lot of time with Godzilla King of the Monsters, and I went through some major periods of Godzilla King of the Monsters burnout. I spent a lot of time with Godzilla vs. Kong, and I went through major periods of Godzilla vs. Kong burnout. I spent a lot of time with New Empire leading up to the film's release, and I was burned out on that one pretty much before it even came out. Godzilla Minus One, I'm not yet burned out on it. I've seen it in theaters more than any other Godzilla film, well over double digits, approaching like 24 times in theaters. Not quite, but getting there. I saw it in so many different formats in theaters, and then since it's come out, I've watched it at home multiple times, which is also a difference, as a lot of the times I'll watch a Godzilla movie over and over and over again when it's in theaters, and then once it comes out on home, I really won't watch it again for a long time. I'll let it cool down. Minus One, I have no burnout with. It's very unique in that, and it's also the one that I've dived into the novelization for recently. I've spent a lot of time breaking it down on the channel. I've done so many Minus One videos. Of course, I'm talking about the sequel for Minus One, which is coming out, and yet I'm not burned out on it. All of that is so special. That's so unique to this Godzilla movie. It's the only one that I have not gotten burned out on by spending this much time with it. Even Shin Godzilla. I watched that movie when it came out in theaters so much, and then I watched it just after it came out in theaters, leading into the home release so many more times that I did get burned out on that one pretty badly, and I took years off of watching that movie. Not that I fell out of love with it, just that I was like, okay, I need to switch it up. And again, that hasn't happened to me yet with Minus One. The film picks up in the final days of World War II with Koichi Shikishima, who lands his Zero on Oto Island. The first shot of the film is the Zero flying in over the ocean with the bomb attached to the bottom of it. It's kind of an inversion of the old Godzilla movies. You know, the first Godzilla movie, Shin Godzilla, starts out on the ocean and then you hear the footsteps of Godzilla and you're following behind the wake of a ship. This one, you're starting out in the sky tracking over the ocean. It's kind of a flip of that. Instead of being in the sea, we're in the sky. It's pretty cool. And the first time I saw this movie, I, of course, didn't have a ton of context to what's happening, as, you know, the movie's just beginning here. And I will say, I truly, for a moment, totally forgot what the plane looked like that delivered the atomic bomb. I definitely, for the briefest moment, thought that this was going to be a sequence displaying the atomic bombing of, I figured, Nagasaki. I was pretty amazed that they were going to start a Godzilla film with such a bold and controversial moment, and that is not what happens. But that's because I went into this movie with a certain expectation, which I'll talk about at the very end, that it was not the accurate expectation to go in with, which was kind of an expectation this movie was going to be playing with real-world historical events more than it does. This is a period piece, and the fact that it's set in the 1940s was a really big selling point on this movie. A lot of the teasers were rich with historical context and visuals and little Easter eggs to history, and so I guess I was expecting going into this film a much deeper emphasis on playing with the real-world historical state Japan was in post-war, and that is not quite what this movie does. Instead, this movie presents us with very specific parts of history that build up the story it's trying to tell, which I'm totally fine with. But that was all just to say that, yeah, when this movie started, I felt like, wow, that was going to be an insane thing to start the movie on. And potentially, thankfully, that is not where we begin. Instead, we pick up with Koichi Shikishima landing his Zero on Oto Island. He has missed his kamikaze attack. Claiming he's had engine problems, Shikishima leaves his plane to a bunch of mechanics under the lead of Sosaku Tachibana. Tachibana's crew discovers there's actually nothing wrong with the plane at all. Instantly, I love the dynamic between Shikishima and Tachibana, the two of those characters meeting on Oto Island. You get a sense of history and respect between the two of them, but you also immediately see that Tachibana knows what Shikishima's done and disapproves of it, but he hasn't said anything about it, which I really like. Shikishima then goes and sits by the ocean watching the waves come ashore, and he's confronted by a mechanic. This is another one of my favorite parts of this movie. Every single character, even these little side characters like this mechanic, they all have such memorable moments. They all mean something. It's like back in the original 1954 Godzilla. Ishiro Honda was very clever in that he'd introduce us to characters in their everyday lives. Think of the people on the train, just talking about their everyday lives, talking about not wanting to evacuate, talking about, oh, they've just been through this with the war. And then later, a couple scenes later, they're directly in the vicinity of Godzilla when he appears. It creates this sense of familiarity with the world. It really builds up the characters. It makes the whole movie feel more meaningful because these characters feel real. And this Godzilla movie does the same thing. We have this mechanic show up here. He has this brief little moment where at first it's like, oh no, is he going to confront Shikishima? But then he does quite the opposite. He comforts him. He tells him that the world needs more people like Shikishima. It's this beautiful little human moment of connection between these two, showing that there's no judgment between them. Also establishing a lot of context as to when this movie is set. The movie just says it's in the final days of World War II. The novelization, I believe, implies implies that it's around August, but the movie itself, if you actually read the Oto Island mechanics board, it seems that this is in February. Either way, the context here is that everybody knows the war's gonna end. Everybody knows Japan's gonna lose. And so why would Shikishima go and sacrifice his life for a worthless fight that they don't believe in? He shouldn't be asked to. And this mechanic shows this compassion right off the bat, and that's what Godzilla Minus One is full of. Human compassion, on a level that I would say no other Godzilla film has ever been, other than maybe Mothra vs. Godzilla 1964. Another one of my favorite Godzilla movies for similar reasons. I think it is absolutely beautiful to start the movie this way, and you know what else is beautiful? Is that this was shot on location. On location in Japan. It's gorgeous. The island scenery is gorgeous. It's just a beautiful mountainscape in the background with a very nice sunlit sky. The clouds are so pretty. It especially pops in minus color when you get a lot of rich textures. It's so great. And this is something that dawned on me immediately in theaters. Godzilla Minus One is a movie shot mostly on location, or as much as they possibly could, you know? There's a real stark difference between this opening scene on Oto Island and some other Hollywood blockbuster pictures which over-rely on CGI, green screen, and the volume. It was really, really nice to have something different and to have something real again. It establishes an authenticity to this movie that very few modern movies achieve, and that's super nice. I'm not saying that like even the Monsterverse doesn't achieve this. Of course, Kong Skull Island is incredibly well done, shot on location. Godzilla 2014 has a real tangibility to it. King of the Monsters, maybe a little bit. That's too much shot on soundstage. I could see that argument. Godzilla vs. Kong, I would totally agree. New Empire is its own deal. But on the whole, I actually think the Monsterverse does a pretty good job shooting on location. Even New Empire does a lot of location shooting. But I'm just saying, in the modern landscape of movies, it was really immediately refreshing to have such a beautiful landscape on full display, knowing that we're on location, not in the volume. It was really nice. Some deep sea fish start washing ashore with their guts bursting out of their mouths. It's such a crazy visual. And it's also a really cool way to foreshadow the ending of the movie, as of course, this is essentially the trick they use to kill Godzilla, forcing him to surface so fast he decompresses and dies, the same way these fish were forced to surface and decompressed and died trying to escape Godzilla. That night, the air raid sirens ring out and we get this incredible scene as Godzilla appears as this massive dinosaur that's familiar to the locals, establishing an immediate connection to Oto Island and a sort of mythology to this world that I really appreciate, calling back to the 1954 film and giving us my favorite ever iteration of a pre-atomic Godzilla. I really like the mystery of what Godzilla is pre-atomic bomb in the Showa series, but we never get an answer to it. We know that there is a creature called Godzilla. He exists. He is a monster that is irradiated by the atomic bomb and shows up as Godzilla. Originally, the idea was that the reason his skin is so wrinkly and textured the way it is because he's suffering from radiation and heat wounds. Shinji Nishikawa disagrees in his Godzilla Encyclopedia, stating that those burns actually were sculpted onto the mini models but didn't translate to the suit, meaning it's very possible Godzilla just always looked like that, and the only difference was that now he has the atomic breath and is radioactive. Either way, we don't know. What we do know is in the Heisei series, we meet the Godzillasaur, and although there's brilliant concept art of what the Godzillasaur could have looked like, the final version I find very underwhelming. Just a kind of T-Rexian dinosaur with sort of Godzilla-ish features. I think it's very underwhelming. I do not actually like the design or characterization of that Godzillasaur. I think it's too clumsy. What I really don't find is, I really don't find the Godzillasaurus interesting. I don't find it all that interesting or compelling. The Millennium series never really gives us an answer as to what Godzilla was pre-atomic bomb. Then we jump to the modern day. Shin Godzilla presents us with a wildly different version of what Godzilla is pre-atomic bomb. He's like a microorganism or some sort of undersea life that transforms into all these different forms before achieving Godzilla's state. We get that represented in Singular Point as well. We never really unpack it in the anime trilogy. And the Monsterverse actually presents us with my least favorite pre-atomic Godzilla origin to date, which is just that they stripped Godzilla of that atomic origin, completely wiping out the entire core themes of the Godzilla series. Who knows why? There's theories that it's because the DOJ got involved with the making of Godzilla 2014 and erased all atomic connections. I actually really like the Monsterverse Godzilla. I just find it to be more than a little disappointing that he's not an atomic monster. 98 also presents us with a pre-atomic Godzilla, which is an iguana, which I don't find compelling either. I find that one to be also very lackluster. I guess in that universe, universe, if Godzilla can transform from an iguana, then there should be all sorts of irradiated monsters running around, which maybe that's what the cartoon gets into. I don't actually remember. Either way, this is the first movie that presents us with a pre-atomic Godzilla that I'm in love with. I love the design. It's very MonsterVerse inspired, which is kind of cool. It kind of ties into the idea that the MonsterVerse Godzilla is not a radiated monster, he just is himself, and this design kind of looks a lot like that. I really like the pre-atomic Godzilla here. He feels like a dinosaur, but he also feels like Godzilla. He's got those very menacing back spines that are unmistakably Godzilla. This is just downright a cool Godzilla design. I would be fine with a movie where Godzilla looks like the pre-atomic Godzilla in this movie the whole time. It would be very MonsterVerse inspired. I actually really like it. I love the way he moves. I love how fast he is. I love how creepy he is. I love how intelligent he comes across. I love that they give him a characterization, that he actually goes out of his way. You don't really get the full impression of it in the film, but especially in that novelization, which I know I shouldn't rely on. I don't want a novelization to have all the answers, but I don't think that this novelization has the answers. The novelization just gives you additional context, which is how they should be used. Of course, they don't need to be used. It's in the movie as well. Godzilla does not kill Tachibana. Godzilla does not kill Shikishima. In the movie, you could see that as they just got lucky, but I like the idea that the novelization kind of presents, which is just that Godzilla didn't kill them because they didn't attack him. We also established that Godzilla's got some sort of connection with the Oto Islanders, and when deep sea fish appear on the island, they know Godzilla will appear, and there's something of an implied symbiotic connection between them, where the natives really appreciate the fish that Godzilla brings ashore. It's a delicacy on Oto Island. I love that. Immediately off the bat, we're getting so much history without actually having to spend time on it. Like, we, the audience, are forced to engage with it. And then you can watch Godzilla's behavior and see, yeah, he does attack when provoked. He attacks the guard tower because it shines a light in his face and there's loud sirens blaring. He's probably scared. He then starts wandering around very menacingly, but he leaves Shikishima alone despite the fact that he directly identifies him and looks at him. And then he attacks the mechanics only after they shoot at him. And the fact that the two that survive are the two that didn't open fire, it's really cool. I really, really like this pre-atomic Godzilla. I think he's fantastic, and it sets up Godzilla going forward in a really great way. And this whole scene is so well done. I cannot praise this scene enough. This whole sequence is incredibly cool. As Godzilla makes landfall, he attacks the outpost, and the mechanics take shelter, and it's just so intense. The music is amazing and terrifying. I love the sound design of Godzilla's growls and his breath. It's so cool. I love that moment when he breathes on Shikishima and Shikishima reacts to the odor of his breath. It's just this tiny little detail. Tachibana then actually orders Shikishima out of their little bunker and tells him to go get in the plane and fire at Godzilla. They're all mechanics. They don't know how to do that, but Shikishima does. He does get in the plane, but he refuses to open fire. The mechanics panic and fire on Godzilla, and Godzilla brutally kills them one by one. He's terrifying here. I wish Toho didn't have their stupid little mandates, because it's clear to me, and I think everybody, that Godzilla should be eating these people. He bites onto them. It feels like he should be grabbing them and eating them up, but Toho has a very strict mandate that Godzilla is not allowed to eat anybody, and so in the end, Godzilla winds up throwing them through the air, which in some degrees a little more messed up, because he doesn't even really get anything from it, other than killing them because they attacked him. I love that long shot where Tachibana is crawling out of the bunker, Godzilla bites the one mechanic, throws him through the air, stomps on the other, his tail strikes through the building. It's all very well done. Godzilla brutally kills each and every mechanic except Shikishima and Tachibana, and Shikishima is almost taken out as Godzilla destroys his plane. I think it's great, and this is where Shikishima passes out. The aftermath is so tragic, with Tachibana dragging the bodies around. You see the actual human devastation that Godzilla causes. There's some kind of gore on screen, and Shikishima and Tachibana have this moment where Tachibana's just yelling at him and throwing him to the ground. It's a really, really well done scene with a lot of great characterization for these two men. It adds a lot of trauma to both of them, and you understand how both of them feel and why they feel that way. As the war ends, Tachibana and Shikishima are brought back to the mainland. I love the visual of all of those wounded and traumatized soldiers on that transport ship. That comes straight out of history. Tachibana comes up to Shikishima and hands him a bunch of photos of the dead mechanics. It's photos of them and their families as a reminder of what Shikishima has caused, or at the very least, what the two of them feel he has caused. Of course, I've done many videos breaking down the fact that even if he opened fire, Godzilla would have survived and it would have been the same result anyways, if not worse. But they don't know that, obviously, and it sets up the core themes of guilt so well. Shikishima is a man overridden by guilt to the point where he feels like he cannot live his life. He is a man so traumatized by his past that he lives as a shell of a person. Through this movie, Godzilla continues to represent his trauma, rearing its head over and over again. Every time he thinks he's going to get to start living, Godzilla will appear to remind him of his past, and it's only once he confronts it and overcomes it through both his bravery and the support he gets from his friends that he's able to overcome all that trauma and start to live for real. It's so well done. It's a really different theme for the Godzilla series, but it's so universal. It's not like the fear of atomic bombs, which this movie does have some of that atomic allegory as well, but this is a more personal and universal theme than we really have ever seen in a Godzilla movie. It's such a core theme that so many of us can relate to on different levels, whether it's PTSD, whether it's a missed opportunity that haunts you, whether it's something tragic that happened to you or that you feel you've caused. You know, there's so many levels to it that we can all relate to it on some degree. We all have a Godzilla weighing over us. We all have something that is holding us back, and it's only through confronting it and coming together with support of others that we can overcome that. I love it. I love it so much. It's kind of like the themes of forgiveness in Godzilla King of the Monsters, which are a little more universal than some of the other Godzilla themes. Of course, that one's a little more directly tied to religion, but it doesn't need to be. Shikishima arrives back in his village in Tokyo, but nothing remains. I like that it's a village in Tokyo because it's easy to forget the Tokyo fire raids caused technically more devastation and death than the atomic bombings. It was just that they happened over a much, much longer period of time of years of repeated bombing attacks. But the Tokyo fire raids were absolutely devastating and very overlooked throughout history. The United States has a long history of bombing civilians to try and make a point, thinking that somehow through that they still retain the moral high ground. And it's moments like this when we can see some of the devastation that causes. Of course, I do feel that this movie could have gone further, like you see all the traumatized soldiers on the ship coming home from the war, but you know what you don't see? Any wounded soldiers. You know, we never really have like a Saving Private Ryan moment where we see the actual full devastation the war causes on people, on their bodies, on their soul, you know? We never get that in this movie, and we don't get that here. I've heard this movie described as a sanitized version of how post-war Japan felt, and I do feel that that's the truth, but I will say, well, I can understand some criticism about that. Like, I believe Hideo Kojima maybe, it was maybe him, or maybe it was a Japanese director. I honestly cannot remember who it was, but it was a very prominent figure in Japanese pop culture, spoke about this movie, saying that it was basically a sanitized version of post-war Japan, and saying that they understand why mostly foreigners, Westerners in particular, are so interested in this version of Godzilla in this story, because it presents post-war Japan, a type of suffering that Americans are not used to seeing. But it doesn't present the realities and the true depths of the horror of that suffering, and I guess I can understand that. Nothing in this movie feels as upsetting and real and tragic as that amazing post-Godzilla devastation sequence in the 1954 film, when Ishiro Honda really puts on display the human cost that the war took on Japan, and people, and children, and mothers, and fathers. It really puts that on display. You have children dying of radiation poisoning. You have wounded people missing parts of their faces and body parts, and suffering in the hospital. Bodies piled on bodies. That's not something that this movie displays, and I would say that's because this movie is, again, a personal journey. I understand why people maybe wanted more of that suffering on screen, because it is important, especially for Americans, to reconcile and understand what the true cost of the war was. But that's not what this movie's trying to talk about. That's what the original Godzilla's for, and that original movie does it better than any other movie probably could, because it was so close to the event. It was so close to the history. This movie uses that history to tell a much more personal story. That's why I'm completely fine with it. I do not feel that it's necessary to fully dwell on the pain of post-war Japan. I understand how the movie's tagline, you know, Japan post-war goes from zero to minus, could set that expectation. Even the title, Minus One, Godzilla's basically dropping them below post-war. But I don't think it's needed for the story. I do not think it's needed for the story being told. And I love the story being told. And we still do get some of it. You know, Shikishima's village, it is visually displayed to us how absolutely ravaged parts of Tokyo were, how destroyed lives were. And we do see some of that human cost. We don't fully dwell on it, but we absolutely do see some of that cost. Shikishima finds that his house has been completely annihilated, turned to nothing. He finds out that his parents were killed in an air raid, and he also finds out from his neighbor Sumiko Ota that they weren't the only ones. Everybody had this type of suffering. Everybody lost something. She figures out immediately what he's done to survive, knowing that he was a kamikaze pilot, and him being alive means only one thing, which is that he abandoned his mission. And so she starts to hate him, blaming him for this, blaming him for the death of her children. She has lost something as well. She lost her children to the war, and of course it's not Shikishima's fault. Even if he had gone through with his attack, it wouldn't have meant anything. Shikishima could have taken his life, and her children would still be dead. And I think she knows that as well, which is why she doesn't really hold it against him for the whole movie. But I do think this scene does a great job showing the tragedy of post-war Japan. It's very effective, but very brief with it. I love how sorrowful the music is. That song Pain, it's fantastic. And the sound design is great too. I love the clinking of wood, and really it is the wood sounds overall, you know? Sumiko throwing the wood pallets onto each other, moving them out of the way as she's walking back to her house. You can hear them clanking against each other. I love when you get the little montage transitioning to night where the people are kind of beating that metal against the wood. I'm not even sure what that guy's really trying to accomplish. Maybe he's trying to chop the wood or something. I've never really thought about what it is he's doing there, but you get that moment with the father and the son, you know, drinking out of the teapot. It's just really well done sound design, which is another thing I think this movie absolutely excels with. Later, Shikishima meets Noriko in a black market after she gets caught stealing and drops off a baby with Shikishima. She leaves him with a baby and escapes some guards who are trying to catch her. Shikishima debates leaving the baby behind and waits for her return, but she never comes back, and so he takes the baby with him. Seeing how caring Shikishima was with the baby, Noriko follows him home, explaining that the baby isn't hers. Its mother was killed in a fire during the air raids, along with her parents, and she has become the protector of this child. She then makes herself at home with Shikishima. I love this scene as well. I love Noriko. I love how she's just immediately like, I'm doing what I want, and she's taking a lot of initiative here. She has a lot of agency in this movie. I also just love her personality. I love her, she doesn't care. She doesn't care about his judgments at all. But you can also tell she's a deeply caring person, and she does immediately care for him right off the bat because she sees the sensitivity in him and also relates to the fact that he has lost so much. I really love their bond. I love their connection. I love this found family. I love this core characterization. This core trio, Shikishima, the baby, Akiko, and Noriko, form the best core heart of any Godzilla film from a human standpoint. I don't think any Godzilla film has been as successful with its core characterization than this movie. And it's not done here because we haven't even met the full cast yet. Sumiko questions Shikishima the next morning about the woman and the baby, and she finds out that Noriko's not the mother. And this is where you see again with her, she immediately doesn't like Shikishima because he has abandoned his duty as a kamikaze pilot, and yet she is such a deeply caring person that she can't do anything but help them. The same way that Shikishima outwardly is telling Noriko that he doesn't want her here and he will not care for her, but he can't do anything but. They're two people that are so good to their core that they cannot do anything but help others. I love the way those two characters reflect each other so much, and again, that's not done either because we haven't even met the full cast yet, and that's the entire cast of this movie. This movie is a beautiful movie about nice people trying their hardest to be there for each other. We don't get movies like that. The biggest conflict we get between human characters in this movie is between Shikishima and Tachibana, and again, Tachibana despises Shikishima for what happened on Oto Island, and yet he can't do anything but be there to help Shikishima. It's so amazing. So amazing. We need more kindness in the world. We need more kindness in films, and movies like this do so much for that. It's so great. All of the characters in this movie are great inspirations. All of them. Sumiko scolds Shikishima and Noriko for not being able to take care of the baby, and you see that she will be there for baby Akiko. She gives up her prized white rice for Akiko, telling them that they can live off anything. They're adults, they can figure it out, but this is for the baby. Also, just huge shout out to the production design for this whole sequence. Shikishima's bombed out village in particular looks amazing during these early scenes. It looks amazing the whole movie, but during these early scenes, there's wet spots everywhere. It feels damp, it feels dirty, it feels sad, there's burn burned, charred wood all over the place. And one detail that I didn't notice until watching this movie, there's spider webs. There are spider webs on objects in the background, like barely visible, that tether objects in the background, because they would be. Because those objects have been there for a few months now. It's so detailed and amazing. One thing that I've brought up before in videos about this prop design, later when Shikishima's rebuilding his house, he's got lights in his house, of course, you know, but back then the wiring was not done as well, especially in these post-war buildings. And so he has literal wires going up to the lights. You can see the wiring on screen, and they're frayed, they're aged. You can literally see they're like falling apart. There's age to them. It's so good. Months later in 1946, we see that Shikishima's shack is growing. He's building a house out of it. We can also see visually, again through the prop design, their clothes are a little nicer than the last time we saw them. They're getting things put together, but they're not quite there yet. He returns home with news that he's got a new job. He's going to be working for the government. It pays well because it's quite dangerous. He will be on a specially made ship meant to avoid mines and will be looking to defuse undersea mines left behind during the war. The US and Japan laid something like, what do they say, 60,000 mines in the ocean during the war. And when the war ended, what do you do with those? You got to get a map of where they are, and you got to go out there. You got to disarm them. Otherwise, they will just be there ready to kill civilians later. Showing, in a way, a price of war that I've never thought about before, and I know is a price that still is kind of relevant. You know, you still hear about like a village in Britain found a bomb in a lake and they have to pull it out, and it's from World War II and it didn't detonate back then, but they have to defuse it now, you know? Like that still happens to this day. You still see stuff like that. And this is one thing, a part of history that I've never thought about. What the hell do you do about all the mines you left? You can't just press a button and blow them all up. You actually have to go out there and risk people's lives to disarm them. It's a small thing that I really appreciate about this movie. It's a great way to give the characters weapons at a time when Japan was completely demilitarized, so nobody had any weapons. It's a great way to give our characters some weapons so they can fight Godzilla later. It's a great way to get them out into the ocean so that they can come in combat with him. And it's a really great way to, again, show part of the post-war suffering that we do not think about. Innocent people had to risk their lives to clean up the mess that was caused during this war. I really like this movie's approach on it too, because the war was started by governments with egos, by people with egos in positions of power, as all wars are. And this movie does not put a lot of blame on the civilian soldiers, especially those drafted. You know, people drafted into war do not hold as much of the blame here as the government's responsible. And I appreciate this movie putting the emphasis on the government being responsible for all this devastation and not the individuals. Now, of course, lots of individuals did absolutely horrible things during the war, and that's on them. And sometimes that was on entire groups of people allowing horrible things to happen. But the individual, people like Shikishima, should not carry the blame for the war forever. Not everybody believed in it. Some people had to do it or else they were gonna die or their families were gonna die. So I just wanted to say that as well. I really appreciate that part of this movie. Upon learning what Shikishima's job is, Noriko protests. We get the first instance here that her parents have instilled a mission in her, a mission to live while they were burning alive. She doesn't outright say that yet, but she forbids Shikishima to die, urging him to live. That is one of the movie's main core themes, you know? The idea of living. Not just being alive with a heartbeat, but living your life unimpeded by guilt and moving forward. Shikishima explains that they need the money, they need this, and it's not just a matter of what he's doing, but it's a matter of saving them all. It's a matter of, if he doesn't get this job, Akiko will starve to death. Kind of another thing that this movie doesn't fully unpack, but it's present, it's here. The fact that babies and children were dying post-war because they did not have the resources they needed. Nobody was looking after them. They can't even afford American powdered milk. The Americans are here. They should be able to help provide for people like this, and yet they're not. And that happened as well. People were forced to crawl up from the depths of their bombed out village to try and remake a life for themselves, and there was a lot of suffering in the meantime. I love as well that Shikishima explains that this is not certain death. This is not like kamikaze pilots. And he arrives to work to find it's a dinky little wooden minesweeper. This is the Shinseimaru, and he meets the crew of the Shinseimaru, the best cast of any Godzilla movie to date. Fantastic. Overall, amazing. We meet the captain, Akitsu, the doc, Noda, my favorite character in this movie. I think he's fantastic, and the kid, Mizushima. I love that they all have distinct and defined personalities. I love that they all have integral roles to play and different themes with each of them. Every single one of these characters undergoes a character arc. Every single one of these characters matters to the movie. It's amazing. It's fantastic. Pacific. The Shinseimaru, with their partnership, the Kaishinmaru, will go along the ocean, cutting bombs, allowing them to surface, and then they'll shoot at them to explode them. Again, some good foreshadowing here, like cutting the bombs and letting them raise to the surface like balloons is exactly what they do to Godzilla at the end, and then shooting the mines to explode them is later what Shikishima does in Godzilla's mouth. And here we find out immediately Shikishima is a great shot. He impresses Mizushima and Akitsu, who could not hit the shot. And here we see Mizushima wishes he could have been in the war. He feels like he didn't serve his country enough, and he has a lot of pride in both himself and his country. But he winds up deeply offending Shikishima in the process, as the war is not something to glorify. There is something to be said for having pride in yourself and your country and wanting to stand up and fight for others. But Shikishima is a reminder that the war is not the way to do that. And continually throughout the movie, Mizushima will be reminded of this lesson, and in the end, he does join the fight against Godzilla, and he does pay a price in that he's almost killed for it. But he does so in a completely harmless way. He does so in a completely supportive way. You know, he joins the fight without firing a single shot. It's fantastic. He gets a taste of being a hero and defending his country and others without becoming a soldier. One night, Shikishima has a nightmare that his village is under attack. He opens the door to find the Oto Island mechanics being killed by Godzilla, and I do kind of wish that Godzilla looked more monstrous here, more terrifying, you know, like a nightmare design of Godzilla. That'd be awesome, but I understand, given that Godzilla's going to go through a design change here in just a minute, they maybe didn't want to do that yet. You know, you want to keep Godzilla consistent with how Shikishima remembers him, but still, very cool. I love that scene as well. I love that he's being tormented by this. He awakens and Noriko tries to comfort him, but he's so upset that he actually believes he's already dead. He can't even make sense of reality. Another thing that I think is great, like this contrast between being so torn up by your guilt that you're so dissociated that you don't even know where you are. I think that's another thing that many people can relate to. Noriko reminds him that he is alive, and the photos of the mechanic are finally what does it, pulling him back to reality. And even when he's back, it's not like he's happy. There is still so much trauma to him that he starts to sob for the Oto mechanics who have died. And here we cut to July 1946, Operation Crossroads Baker test. Basically, like, Shikishima's trying to move forward, and here the movie is trying to say, it's only gonna get worse from here. You know, it'll get worse before it gets better. July 1946, Operation Crossroads Baker test in Bikini Atoll. It's the only time on screen we ever get to see the creation of Godzilla at the hands of the Americans. It's a great way to tie into the atomic origin of Godzilla, while not playing into the 1954 Castle Bravo test. Of course, here, it's this test, the Baker test, that creates Godzilla, as the nuke winds up hitting a sleeping Godzilla in the bottom of the ocean, transforming him into something even worse, something more monstrous, and something more tragic, as Godzilla wasn't all that bad of a guy, but now he is. Over the next few months, Shikishima gets very used to his job. We get this great little montage of him growing a friendship with the Shinseimaru crew. We also see him and Noriko raising Akiko together. They build a life and a family together. They build a home for their child. And one night during a celebratory dinner, the Shinseimaru crew comes over, and here they find out that Noriko and Shikishima are not married. I love the humor in this. I love this scene. It's such a human scene, and it does not belong in a Godzilla movie. That's my favorite part of it. It feels like calling back to the olden days of Godzilla films when we'd get scenes of the characters being humans outside of the story. I love it. They find the story of Shikishima's found family so beautiful that they just can't understand why Shikishima hasn't embraced it yet, and this winds up offending him even more, and so he shuts it all down, telling Akiko that he's not her father, and that he doesn't want to marry Noriko. This upsets everyone. And again, we get a great little thing here, where like, this scene, Shikishima basically says, I don't want Noriko, I don't want to marry her, and in the next scene, we get her response to that. In March 1947, Noriko gets a job in the newly rebuilt Ginza. She plans to move out on her own and feels like she's holding Shikishima back. Obviously, she feels like, it's either you step up now or I'm out of here, and Shikishima does not do enough. Shikishima protests, but not enough to get her to stay. And again, here, Shikishima wants to move on. He wants to move on from his guilt so that he can live happily with Noriko, but he won't get to. A series of shipping disasters happens at sea, and I like that this is kind of like we're picking up at the start of the first Godzilla movie with a series of ship disasters in the ocean, except now we know why. We've seen the origin of this. We've seen what comes before. The US discovers that the creature responsible is Godzilla, and Godzilla wages a war on naval ships in the Pacific. I love that you can see like Godzilla specifically going out of his way to target those ships. They're not even like like closing in on him, he's closing in on them, and he's also closing in on Japan. This is where the movie does something that I think is pretty clever, a pretty clever way out of dealing with the actual political history of the time period, as I was hoping this movie was going to unpack the US occupation, having the occupational forces have to defend Japan, having them have to team up with their former enemies, and instead, I think the movie does something very clever because that's not what this story's about. That would get in the way of the core personal story this film is trying to tell. And so, they find a really clever way to bow the US out of this, get them out of the movie entirely. Out of fear that any sort of retaliation against Godzilla will provoke the Soviets and raise tensions, the US passes the fight to the Japanese. And they don't fully give them access to like weapons or anything, but they do allow them to defend themselves and say like, hey, this is gonna have to be a you guys problem. And I like that first of all it shows the US is not fully taking responsibility for their actions here. They've created Godzilla. They're not even gonna do anything about him. They're gonna let him wreak havoc, which is very real world. That's very much what the US is known for, causing problems and then bowing out immediately when they actually have repercussions. And it's also a great way to just ground us with the characters. It also shows that there's not just the US is to blame, because the Japanese government does the exact same thing and bows out of this fight for the same reasons, leaving it to a bunch of private citizens to handle, which is this movie's way of being like, hey, they're not fully on our side either, guys. They're not here to help us either. It's us, the people, that have to stand up for each other. In May 1947, the Shin is sent out to the remains of a massive US ship. Love the visuals, love the tension, love the music here, and Noda explains that their mission is to locate and confront the creature responsible. Shikishima then spots floating deep sea fish and connects the dots that this is Godzilla, and Godzilla's here now. It's back. He reveals that he was a failed kamikaze pilot and that he was present for the Oto massacre. Noda then reveals that it's up to them to scavenge mines out at sea and use them against Godzilla as a way to stall until the Takao can arrive to kill Godzilla off. Later, Godzilla does appear, ambushing the Kaishin Maru, kicking off what is probably the most iconic scene in this movie and what is, in my opinion, a perfect Godzilla sequence. Believing they're the last defense between here and Tokyo, Akitsu planned on confronting Godzilla, that is, until he sees him, when he realizes you can't fight God, and he tries to run, but they really can't. Their ship is stalled, and so they're forced to confront their problems. They do combat Godzilla, who chases their ship in this amazing sequence where he's closing in on them. There's so much tension. I love the way Godzilla swims. I love how menacing he is. I love that it feels like he's almost toying with them, but I also love his limitations. He's not fast enough to catch up to them right off the bat. He is struggling to catch up to them. He is not invincible. They can do things to damage him, and it creates so much more of an interesting dynamic than if Godzilla was purely invincible. If he was able to catch up with them immediately and sink their ship. If Godzilla was so powerful that nothing they do could ever do anything to him. That's not interesting. And I don't find a Godzilla who's purely invincible to be compelling at all. I find this type of Godzilla to be compelling, one that is a little smaller. The size honestly doesn't always matter, it's just how they use him. Like, I appreciate in this movie that Godzilla is a little smaller because it creates more intimacy between him and the human characters. You could have done the same thing if he was bigger, but I like that size. I like the size of him in this movie. I like the limitations. I like that he's slow. I don't need him to be super fast, and in fact, typically if Godzilla moves too fast, it breaks my immersion. I like that there are weaknesses that can be exploited here. It creates a way more interesting dynamic because you get the sense there is a way to win. There is a way to beat him. And if there wasn't a way to beat him, we're just waiting for him to destroy things. If there is a way to beat him, it raises the stakes because we're wondering what's gonna happen next. I like that we wonder what's gonna happen next. And I also like how in direct danger the core central cast is here. A lot of Godzilla movies, they'll put the core cast like on a hill or something and they'll watch scenes like this play out, but they won't be in them or participate in them. I love that it's our core main characters who are a part of this attack. And it's a great way as well because this is also a different dynamic for Godzilla. We're not used to fully exploring him as a sea monster. I love that he's like an amped up Jaws here. You know, he's like the shark from Jaws. He's so scary. I love it. I love seeing Godzilla in his element in the ocean in ways we've never seen before. It's fantastic. They wind up detonating a mine inside of Godzilla's mouth, blowing half of his face off. Such a crazy visual, and it damages their ship in the process, but it's not done. Godzilla regenerates in the best on-screen use of his regeneration factor we've ever seen. Something that was first brought up in the Millennium series with Regenerator G1, but we finally see it done in a compelling and scary way here. It's great. Godzilla regenerates and is about to attack them when the Takao arrives, blasting him. I love it! I love the whip pan over to the Takao. I love the music kicking in. Divine is one of the best songs ever written for the Godzilla series, right up there with Persecution reaction of the masses. It's incredible. It sets the mood and tone for this movie. It is amazing. I love this scene so much. This might be my favorite scene in this movie. I love it. They blast Godzilla up a bunch, and you can see it does injure him, but it cannot kill him. It's not doing enough damage to kill him. And it also teaches our characters a valuable lesson that Godzilla's way more vulnerable from the inside than the out. So Godzilla dives down and then rises up and does battle with the Takao. Something that I really was desperate for before this movie came out was to not just see Godzilla use his atomic breath to blast through things. I don't love the atomic breaths being like so over relied on. I'm fine with them being incredibly overpowered, but I would like there to be a cost to it, whether it drains Godzilla of energy or whatever, whether he can't use it all the time. I like a Godzilla who is forced to rely on other things. The sea battles in the Heisei series in particular was just Godzilla floating around shooting things with his atomic breath, and I love that here Godzilla climbs up onto the Takao, biting through it, crashing through it, grabbing it, smacking it. I love that there is a physical fight here, and I love how much weight Godzilla has. Like, even just Godzilla grabbing this ship is nearly sinking it. It's amazing. The Takao blasts Godzilla off of it. He falls under the water, and you can see it does injure him. It does wind up hurting him. And as Godzilla sinks into the ocean, a blue glow emerges. What an incredible way to build up the atomic breath. We, the audience, know what this is going to be, but you still don't fully reveal it yet. Also a great way to save it for later. Godzilla fires his atomic breath up through the ocean in this insane bolt of atomic energy that slices the ship and then explodes outward like a mini nuke. It's incredible. What a cool twist on Godzilla's atomic breath to make it a literal atomic bomb. What an awesome change up. It also makes Godzilla's atomic breath very different because it now it has an effect on Godzilla as Godzilla surfaces and he is charred up and injured from his own beam. It's a great way to say, first of all, it's a slow beam. It takes some time to build up. And number two, there is a cost to it. Godzilla isn't even allowed to wield nuclear power without some sort of ramifications. There is a direct cost to his atomic actions for himself as well. It does more damage to others than it does to him, but it bites him in the ass as well. It's great, you know? That's how I feel about the United States. The atomic bombs did more damage to others than it did to the US, but it still weighs on the US and damaged them in the long run as well. We still see the price of that to this day. I also love that it's also because of Godzilla's action here. The atomic breath that winds up injuring him, that later on, all of the wounds he suffers in this scene are the wounds that are re-exposed from the pressure damage that wind up helping kill him. I also just love the way Godzilla looks with all the battle damage. I love me a character battle damage. I love when a character takes a beating, and I love seeing Godzilla finally show some battle damage. I feel like movies are way too scared to show Godzilla with battle damage. Rarely ever do we see it, but it's always awesome when we do, and this is my favorite instance of it. I think he looks fantastic. I love his roar here, the new twist on the 54 roar. So cool, so powerful. He roars in triumph and then returns to the ocean, swimming away. Shikishima passes out and wakes up in a hospital and is informed that Godzilla is still heading for Tokyo. Nothing changed, but the government has ordered them to silence. They're not allowed to talk about Godzilla out of fear that it'll start a panic. That night at home, Shikishima finally confesses his trauma to Noriko, and she is incredibly supportive of him. She's there to reaffirm him. She shares that her parents passed on the mission to live to her while they were literally burning to death in front of her. She has her own trauma from the war, and she is here for him, and she wants them to be together. I love it. It's great. The next morning, Shikishima awakens to see Noriko and Akiko so happy and peaceful and cute that it's time. He finally asks for the auto mechanic's forgiveness so that he can start to live again, and unfortunately for him, he hasn't earned that forgiveness. At least he hasn't earned it for himself. Because as an answer, Godzilla appears, blowing through a naval blockade. Love the visuals as he swims under that ship and making landfall. As Shikishima plays with Akiko, they hear an announcement on the radio. What a classic Godzilla setup here. It's also a tie-in back to the Always Sunset 2 scene. Godzilla has appeared in Ginza. We cut to Ginza and there is absolute chaos in the streets as Godzilla tramples through. I love this moment of silence where everyone's screaming and then they go silent as these trams crash into the street. And then Godzilla steps down and they start to scream again. It reminds me of that amazing footstep reveal in Godzilla 2014. We then cut to Noriko's train in Tokyo and it takes off towards Ginza, putting us right in the direct path of Godzilla 1954. Amazing stuff here. The train takes off but is stopped as a tram flies through the air, crashing into the tracks. We then hear the footsteps out the window, drawing everyone's attention as Godzilla arrives. Ifukube's Godzilla theme starts blaring. It's amazing. I can understand understand why people find the Godzilla theme to kind of be out of place with the rest of the music. The rest of the music is so ethereal in this movie. And the Ifukube Godzilla theme is so strong and classic and bold that it does stand out, but I like that it stands out. It stands out to say Godzilla's here. It's really cool. It's also a great way to be like, this is the definitive classic Godzilla movie. Like, this does it all. It's got the Ifukube music. It's got the classic Godzilla solo film vibes. Everything you could want happens here. Godzilla comes trampling through the street. I love when he steps on that bridge and explodes the ground under his foot. Then he bites into the train, lifting it into the air. Just great classic Godzilla stuff as well. He splits it apart with Noriko as the only survivor, jumping into the river, and then Godzilla drops the train right behind her. Godzilla then returns to another iconic movie location, the old Nippon Gekijo Theater. He starts to attack it as reporters watch on, doing a live commentary on what Godzilla's up to. He tail strikes those buildings to dust. It's amazing. And then he kills the reporters as he walks past, striking the building with his leg. Noriko's almost killed as she makes it back into the streets, but is saved by Shikishima, who shows up to get her out of there. A tank assault then strikes Godzilla, I love that as well, who emerges unscathed and more powerful than ever, charging his spines one by one. Takashi Yamazaki has found a way to make Godzilla's charge up cooler than it has ever been. The way the spines glow blue in that like very Monsterverse-y way, where the blue glow is from the core of the spines, but then they wiggle and they eject out to show they truly are charged. Also tying back into the atomic bomb, of course, this is supposed to detonate like a Fat Man styled explosion, which is why Godzilla's spines have to compress inward to fire the atomic bolt in the first place. They build up one by one. It's so powerful. The music is incredible. The atmosphere is great. The visuals are great. The sound design is great. And then Godzilla unleashes his atomic breath, and it's amazing. Even before it explodes, I love the way that just the atomic breath disintegrates the buildings around it. There's a shockwave the atomic breath itself releases. Could have been a little more blue. I would have liked if it was a little more saturated blue, but I love it overall. Then explodes into a full-on nuclear bomb on the capital and annihilates Tokyo. Noriko saves Shikishima by pushing him to safety, but she's hit with the blast in the process. In the aftermath, Shikishima emerges in the rubble, looking for Noriko, but finding he is the only one left. He then sees my favorite visual in the movie with Godzilla watching the mushroom cloud, such a prominent visual, and screams everything that the Godzilla series has been about up to this point. Everything thematically that Godzilla has represented is represented in this one shot as Godzilla watches on and then roars at the growing mushroom cloud. Then black rain falls on Shikishima as he screams in agony. The music swells into this amazing opera. It's so good. The black rain tying back into real life history is so devastating, and we see the city is completely destroyed. Thousands are killed or missing. A wake is held for Noriko in the aftermath. The Shinseimaru crew and Sumiko band together, again showing that these people, despite their differences, are always here for each other. They band together for Akiko, and Shikishima is so disturbed by what's going on that he starts to cry and then breaks down, sort of laughing, feeling that he's being punished. He's being punished from the Oda mechanics for his lack of action, and in fact, no, he's not. Godzilla was going to do this regardless, but he cannot escape those feelings. I like that Godzilla's there to remind him over and over again of his trauma. Well, at the same time, he is reading into it in a way that only he could, in a way that anybody would in his position. Noda reveals that there's a plan being hatched on how to fight Godzilla and asks Shikishima to join. This is where the movie kind of gets into this slower bit, like kind of, I don't know, about 30-40 minutes go by before Godzilla shows back up. But unlike with Shin Godzilla, where it feels like the movie grinds to a halt, I feel like we're still really cruising here. This meeting scene is probably the longest feeling scene of this stretch. Like, we do spend some time here at this meeting, but then once this meeting's over, we fly through the next few sequences. And I really like this meeting scene. It's very compelling to me. The meeting is held and it's filled with former servicemen. Mizushima actually is the only one who hasn't served, but he's here because the Shinseimaru crew was joining because they've all fought Godzilla. Then the former Yukikaze captain, Hota, comes in. I like again that we're playing with real world history a little bit here. Takashi Yamazaki seems to have a really strong sense of real world, like ships and vehicles and weaponry and like little details like this. You know, the Yukikaze being one of the destroyers used here. Of course, that's a real ship in real life. Although the captain Hota, I don't think he's supposed to be a real guy. But I really like Hota. He's actually a pretty underrated character. I like him a lot. He appears and explains that the US will remain out of this fight, but has allowed the Japanese to rearm themselves at least a little bit. They've gotten 4 destroyers for use. The Japanese government is also out of this fight, basically leaving this in the hands of their own little organized group here, all in an effort to avoid Soviet escalation. Again, kind of skirts past a lot of the more interesting topics you could cover with the historical angle, but it is not necessary for the story, and I like that Soviet reasoning as an excuse to get the story more focused. This is a civilian-led effort. I like that, putting the power in the hands of the people. People protest the lack of support and firepower they have, considering the only 4 destroyers they've been granted have no weaponry and have been decommissioned. I really like that aspect of the historical angle. But Noda explains that they're unneeded. Conventional weapons don't work against Godzilla, so they have to fight him with unconventional means in the first place. Noda has devised a plan to sink Godzilla, using tanks full of freon gas that will envelop Godzilla in bubbles and cause him to rapidly descend. I love the idea that they're gonna fight Godzilla with the power of the sea, as Noda says. The fact that the only way you can take Godzilla down is through a force of nature builds up Godzilla as a force of nature even stronger. I think it's so cool. Akitsu and Shikishima aren't quite sold, questioning how a sea creature could be killed by this means, considering he's already used to the ocean depths and the pressure, which I really appreciate the movie explaining as well, but it isn't technically the pressure that's going to be doing the damage. It's the rapid changes in pressure and atmosphere. That is a really cool way to fight Godzilla. Godzilla will be crushed by the rapid pressure change itself after dropping into the depths of the ocean. Shikishima almost leaves, but Noda and Mizushima convince him to stay, and then Noda explains the plan in full, that they're going to use the destroyers to wrap around Godzilla, causing him to get entangled with the freon tanks, and then they're going to use those to plunge him into the Sagami Trench. If Godzilla survives, they will force him to surface using massive balloons made by the Toho Balloon Company, a fictional company for this movie. Those balloons in this movie are used to help people when ships are sinking or during events like that. They're like giant life preservers, they explain. The rapid decompression will cause Godzilla to burst. A demonstration's held in the courtyard and most people are convinced. Some of them still, however, hold out and choose to leave, going home with their families. I like that the movie basically says there's no shame in not wanting to fight. You don't have to. No one's being forced into this conflict. It's completely voluntary. Obviously not the choice the government gave people during the war. A lot of the people decide to stay. Somebody's gotta do it. After a passionate speech from Hota and an inspiring message from Noda that this is not certain death. Again, this scene has a lot of really great humor mixed in. I love that moment when Noda speaks into the microphone and it's too loud and it's like and everybody reacts to it. And then I also love here the way the people are reacting to, like, very naturally. Like, is it certain death? No? Well, that beats wartime. I like that a lot. Again, humanizing everybody, and all of these people in the room, everybody with, like, speaking lines, and even a lot of the people that don't have them, continue to come up over and over again from this point till the end of the movie. They're all involved in Operation Watasumi. It's great. You've got the guy with the mustache. He's a very prominent figure here in this scene, and he will show back up later. He'll show back up, first of all, he's the guy that asks, like, are you saying we should prepare our families that we're gonna die? And then he also shows up on the ships during the finale. And then there's also another man in this scene, the second guy, who's like, I saw what happened in Ginza. There's no way to fight this. That guy winds up being the first guy to salute Godzilla after his death. Again, just like Ishiro Honda, layering in these characters so that we care about them later when they show up. They're not faceless soldiers. We've seen them in these scenes before. Also, fun fact, that guy who salutes Godzilla at the end is one of the soldiers in Shin Godzilla, so he's a returning character. He's the only character to return in both Shin Godzilla and this movie. That night when they're all getting drinks, Akitsu questions Noda's plan. Noda wants to lure Godzilla around in order to get him to the trap point using a recording they've recovered from Ginza. Mizushima thinks that they should use the destroyers to pull Godzilla up, but he's quickly dismissed. I always thought that, like, wouldn't it be good to use the destroyers in conjunction with the balloons, have the balloons pulling and the destroyers pulling at once, but it probably wouldn't have made a difference either way. They would have gotten Godzilla a little higher up before the balloons pop. I like that moment where Akitsu's like, in short, your plan's full of holes, and then later the plan literally is full of holes as Godzilla escapes by popping holes in the balloons. Shikishima, on the other hand, has a different idea. He requests a fighter plane in order to lure Godzilla around. Akitsu confronts him about just doing this because he wants revenge for Noriko, and again, it's not like they hate each other. It's not like they're even all that personally mad at each other, but what's happening here is Akitsu knows that Shikishima ultimately has lost his desire to live. Now they all know he's a former kamikaze pilot, and Akitsu doesn't want his friend to get hurt, so it results in anger. He grabs Shikishima and confronts him about not marrying Noriko when he had the chance. Shikishima says the reason he didn't, despite wanting to and knowing she wanted it, is that his his war isn't over. What a great line, and a great way to sum up the way people like this feel. Also, I feel like Shin Godzilla and Godzilla Minus One both kind of have overarching themes about Japan still to this day being looked at as the country it was in World War II, and still to this day having the reputation of post-war weighing down all these aspects of the country. And I like the idea that this movie, as well as Shin Godzilla, raises the question, can Japan's war finally be over? Has enough time passed that they can finally move on? Can people finally let the country move on from being stuck in its post-war state? The fact that the US wrote their constitution very hastily and poorly, resulting in a lot of very, very complicated and in some degrees intentionally so policies that weigh the country down. I think it's interesting that both Shin Godzilla and Minus One ask the question, can their war finally be over? Noda does go through with Shikishima's request, locating a Shinden. What a cool plane, something I didn't even know existed, but it looks fantastic and it really sets a mood for this movie. I really like it. The shape of it, the color of it, the whole thing, it's so cool, and I love the way it flies later on, but it's in bad shape. But Shikishima knows just the guy, a skilled mechanic who could repair this plane. Shikishima searches desperately for Tachibana to repair this plane and in some ways finally get closure. It's also because Shikishima has alternative means for wanting Tachibana's help. He won't accept help from anybody else. It has to be Tachibana. Eventually, he sends out letters accusing Tachibana of causing the Oto massacre that get his attention. And this works, and Tachibana shows up, attacking Shikishima. This whole sequence really flies by, and from here, the movie wraps up rather quickly. I think it's fantastic. Like I said, it's just that one meeting scene that I think goes on, and kind of, not even in a bad way, but kind of goes on slowly and deliberately. But then from here, like, this whole montage is quick. This whole rest of the finale is really quick. Tachibana learns that Godzilla is back and responsible for the destruction of Tokyo. Shikishima explains that Godzilla is invincible from the outside, but he needs Tachibana's help to transform the Shinden into a kamikaze plane so that he can fly it into Godzilla's mouth, killing him. I like that Tachibana here is like, he doesn't hear the reason in it, but you can see how angry he is, and you can see that he's like, oh, so you're finally going through with your mission, are you? And Shikishima immediately calls him. Tachibana's war isn't over either. So Tachibana accepts the mission to repair the plane. But I feel like another thing is, like, as this goes on, Tachibana's gotta weigh on that, right? He's gotta think about it at least a little bit. Like, the whole basis of Shikishima's plan is that the Takao couldn't hurt Godzilla, but from the inside he's vulnerable? Tachibana's gotta realize at some point he has to accept the fact here. Shikishima could not have done anything to stop Godzilla back in the day. If he had opened fire, it wouldn't have worked. But now Shikishima has a plan. That's probably one of the reasons he forgives him later on. That and the fact that I think he's just matured. And he realizes, most importantly, Shikishima has matured. Akitsu reassures Noda that things will work out as preparations are underway. Then a radiation buoy picks up readings that Godzilla is heading for Tokyo. Unfortunately, plans aren't quite finished, but everyone is willing to do whatever it takes to get things done. I love the idea that everybody's working together here. Noda gives this wonderful speech about how this is not a fight to the death, but instead a fight to live for the future. Such a beautiful scene. Noda and Akitsu then tell Mizushima that he isn't allowed to help out. He isn't allowed to join the fight. They're trying to save him from the horrors of war, knowing what it's truly like. I think that's a great scene as well. I love Mizushima. I love his pride. I love how much he wants to help. I love how much he cares for them. I love how hurt he is here. And that moment when Akitsu's walking away and says, "We leave the future to you," is so beautiful, because you see Noda and Akitsu truly believe they are going to die, and they're trying to save Mizushima's life. Meanwhile, Shikishima heads home, and he thanks Sumiko for looking after Akiko all this time, and it's here where she starts to realize something is wrong as well, and you can see she cares so deeply for him. Even though she was so mad at him at the start, she cares for him, not just for Akiko, but for him. And so Shikishima shares one last night with Akiko, his daughter, finally accepting the title of her father, and it's a great cute little scene. As she sleeps, he leaves her with a note full of money for Sumiko, and then he slips out to meet with Tachibana as he finishes the Shinden. In the morning, Akiko goes to Sumiko and she realizes exactly what's going on. Then Godzilla enters the bay and attacks the acoustic minesweepers projecting his roar that are supposed to be leading him around. The plan does not work, and Godzilla lands at Yokosuka Naval Base. It's awesome. I love the way he throws that ship on shore. I love the shots of him landing. So cool. It forces an emergency takeoff of Operation Watasumi. And as that's going on, Shikishima gets into Shinden and sets out for the countryside to find Godzilla and lure him to sea. Meanwhile, Sumiko gets a telegram. And this leads to this whole amazing sequence, one of the best sequences in the movie, and the sequence that for me is the most -1 of this whole film. The song Resolution is playing. It is fantastic. I love it so much. It's got this amazing pace to it. It's got this wonderful over motif. You know, I don't know, I'm not, I don't know music terminology, but I love the main motif that continues through the entire song. I've described it on the channel before as like this little is really Shikishima's theme here. It plays earlier in the movie, it plays here, it plays during the credits. It's really kind of the theme of Shikishima. It even plays when he's about to sacrifice himself at the end of the movie. And then the choirs are brought in with this enormous thundering, booming bass drums. And that is Godzilla. And this song really is the battle between Shikishima and Godzilla. Shikishima is light and nimble and in the air. Godzilla is low and heavy and bassy. And the two of them contrast. They fight. Godzilla's got the godly choir going on. And in the end, it's the resolution part. Shikishima's part that survives. That's how the song ends. Shikishima will win the fight. I think it's great. Oh my god, and I love this scene. I love the visuals. I love the Shinden flying around. I love when Shikishima's looking out the window and you can see he's got like a certain level of pride of himself, you know? He's a great pilot and he's back in the air and he feels like he's in his element. He feels like he's finally doing something right. This is the first time in the movie when he's truly fighting for someone other than himself, as in this scene he is only fighting for Akiko. That's the only thing on his mind anymore. There's no self-preservation left. Only the goal to do better for the people around him. Then he locates Godzilla in the countryside. Those beautiful, beautiful shots as Godzilla stomps his way into the village, destroying that building with his foot. And then the Shinden flies in. I love this scene so much, man. This finale is one of my favorite finales of any Godzilla film. I want to say it's my favorite of any of the solo Godzilla films, but man, even though this is a more exciting sequence, you cannot top the thematic weight of Serizawa using the oxygen destroyer. I mean, that's just its own special breed. But other than that, this has got to be one of my favorite finales to any Godzilla movie. Shikishima locates Godzilla in the village and the two attack each other, with Shikishima finally taking shots at Godzilla and being able to outmaneuver him. Godzilla getting frustrated and tail swiping and then charging after him. Shikishima leads Godzilla to sea and straight towards the trap point, and then Operation Watasumi is underway. They send the destroyers after Godzilla and Godzilla sees them coming, charges up his atomic breath, and blasts the two destroyers, exploding them. We find out they're actually vacant. They were sent there as a decoy to get Godzilla to use his atomic breath so that he'd have to take some extra time to build up a new charge. The explosion blows up so huge and then giant waves crash against the two surviving destroyers, and the operation officially kicks off when Hota calls it, and Ifukube's Godzilla March slowly builds up. Ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, bum. So great, being brought back, originally used in the Heisei series, and then building up and kicking off with that epic Godzilla March. And it's used the way it was originally intended in the Godzilla series, technically not written for Godzilla, but originally when it was used in the Godzilla series, that's a military march, and it's being restored to its original context. I've seen some like kind of pretentious takes about Ifukube's music, in particular about how the King Kong versus Godzilla theme has strayed so far from its original meaning that we don't even recognize it as King Kong's theme anymore. Well, first of all, it was never really King Kong's theme. It is used in King Kong vs. Godzilla. It's not King Kong's theme. It is the main title for the movie, and then it's used as the natives sing it to put Kong to bed. It's used a couple times throughout that film. It was used way more iconically, I would argue, in 1995's Godzilla vs. Destroya during the end credits fanfare celebrating the history of Godzilla, as they thought that was going to be the last Toho Godzilla movie. And this is kind of the context in which it's used here, is this epic fanfare extension of the Godzilla March. I think it's a fantastic use of that theme. And it's like, that take cracks me up, where it's like, we've strayed so far from the use of that theme that you don't even recognize it as King Kong's anymore. Godzilla's March was written in the, Arctic Forest is the first song Ifukube ever used it in. It's used as a broader, symphonic piece. And then he, of course, used it in not Godzilla, but I believe in 1953 in a movie called like The Flower Shop, or like it's called like Woman in the Flower Shop or something. I don't know. It's like a love story movie, and it's used as the opening march there. So we are far from the original context of these songs, and I think that's fine. Ifukube was really well known for reusing his music in new and creative ways, and I love that that legacy is continuing here. It's just so epic here. It's so good. This is my favorite iteration of the Godzilla March, especially with that King Kong versus Godzilla theme. I love this rendition from Naoki Sato. The only other one that comes close at the moment for me is King of the Monsters is pretty good. This is pretty close to the King of the Monsters version, and the one from Singular Point is fantastic. But it's so exciting. We kick off with such an exciting finale. The ships take off towards Godzilla. They wrap him up. He's trying to figure out what's going on. Shikishima keeps distracting with the Shinden. Godzilla's taking swipes at him, jumping, trying to bite him. And then they wrap around Godzilla. He realizes that he's in danger, starts to charge up. Right before Godzilla unleashes his atomic breath, that coil hits. I love the sound design. It just goes doing. And then right before he atomic breaths, we call it, the Freon tanks burst and Godzilla is plunged into the ocean. It's so exciting. The music also is fantastic right there. Oh my god, I love it. They do in fact sink Godzilla, and the pressure does harm him. It squeezes him so hard his atomic energy goes out and he cannot do his atomic breath, but it does not kill him. They try to surface Godzilla with the balloons, and it does seem to be working. It causes his eyes to bulge out of his head. It's so brutal, and it causes him to start swelling, but he is able to shred the balloons, as you'd expect, given how spiky he is. The destroyers try to pull him up, just as Mizushima said, and just as Noda warned, they do not have the power. The crane holding on to Godzilla starts to break. As all hope is about to be lost, Mizushima arrives with an army of tugboats, proving that he is not worthless and he can help out, again, without firing a single shot. This is an edit where I can understand why people don't like it, as it makes not a lot of sense for us to just cut to all the tugboats tied onto the destroyers, pulling them in opposite directions, and it kind of skips the time gap. It's like, how is Godzilla still so pressurized with that big of a time gap? I don't care. The pacing of the scene is fantastic. It works really well. This is about the only logical leap you have to take in the entire film for the most part. It's about the only one. And it's a much smaller logical leap than pretty much anything that happens in 1954's Godzilla. I mean, just think about the fact that they were able to build those high tension wires around the entirety of Tokyo in a matter of days. Like, that makes no sense. The oxygen destroyer itself makes no sense. This little cut makes about as much sense as them building the high tension wires. So I'm totally fine with it. I'm totally fine with it. It really works for the flow of the scene, and it's a great moment. It gives Mizushima such an epic moment, and I'm a big fan of it. I love everybody banding together to save the day. And they gotta catch themselves a Godzilla, so they're pulling him out of the water, and it works. They surface Godzilla. He is dragged up to the surface, and he looks horrible. He's all swollen up. There's enormous bulging pieces of him. It's kind of bloody. His eyes are completely like about to pop out of his skull. Godzilla's screaming in agony, and you kind of, for the first time in the entire film since maybe the beginning, feel bad for him. You feel bad for him. He doesn't deserve this, and everybody knows it. Godzilla starts to charge up. He's still not damaged enough, and he's about to atomic breath them all when this amazing long moment of silence. The first time I saw this, you could hear the tension in the room without a single sound. You could just hear people's, like, everybody holding their breath. It was so palpable. It continued on multiple theatrical viewings. What a powerful, powerful moment, cutting to absolute silence. And then the Shinden catches your view. And the movie does such a brilliant trick of having Shikishima so involved in the fight at first, but then completely transitioning to Watasumi to the point where many people, including myself, were so caught up in the drama that we can kind of forget about Shikishima. Is it obvious? Yeah, of course. Shikishima flying in to save the day is obvious. His sacrifice is obvious. Even the fact that he escapes and is able to eject is obvious. Of course, there's that brief hint with Tachibana earlier, and same with the telegram. We all know what the telegram is coming to with Sumiko, but it doesn't matter how obvious it is. The movie was effective in getting us to go along with the drama for such a moment that I was able to forget where Shikishima was until the Shinden catches my view, and then all at once it comes flooding in, and the movie presents it like it's gonna be his death so heavily that I also wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't thinking he is gonna eject, even though earlier I figured when Tachibana's talking to him that he is gonna eject. But the Shinden flies in. Shikishima crashes into Godzilla's mouth and the plane explodes, blowing off the top of Godzilla's head. It's brutal. Noda then spots Shikishima parachuting down in safety. We learn in a flashback that Tachibana repaired an ejector seat in the Shinden to save Shikishima, encouraging him to live. And the fact that Tachibana can forgive Shikishima is already touching, but the cutaway to Tachibana crying tears of joy and relief that Shikishima has survived, that it's finally over and they can live peacefully is so amazing. Godzilla then disintegrates, atomic energy bursting through him. It's fantastic, a fantastic Godzilla death as Shikishima descends. Godzilla literally melts into nothing. It's so cool. And to be honest, I'm kind of sad that Godzilla survived, only because it is such a beautiful ending. Everyone on the ships starts to salute Godzilla as the true victim here. And then the ships arrive back in the harbor. Shikishima and Mizushima reunite and hug. Mizushima is celebrated as a hero. Everybody gets their happy ending. And then Sumiko appears with Akiko on her shoulder. And she gives Shikishima the telegram. I love the callback with her hitting Shikishima the same way she hit him in anger at the start of the film, as she's so happy that he's alive and relieved that this happy ending has finally occurred. Shikishima arrives at a hospital with Akiko and they find Noriko alive with bandages over her face and a broken arm, but she is alive. She asks if Shikishima's war is finally over, and they embrace as he tells her yes. As they hug, a dark mark in the shape of Godzilla's dorsal spine grows through her veins in her neck, an ominous but beautiful ending. I know some people were like, again, kind of a little underwhelmed that she survives, because there's no chance she survives in Ginza, and of course there's no chance she survives in Ginza. It's, first of all, heightened for the movie. Is it melodramatic? Absolutely. It's not trying not to be. It's great melodrama. That's another complaint my friends have, is that this movie's a little melodramatic, even with some of the acting. I think in particular Kamiki and Minami Hamabi they find to be melodramatic. Again, look at Godzilla history. That first film is heavily melodramatic. Emiko breaking down in tears when Serizawa is burning his nose. Pretty much any scene with Emiko and Ogata is highly melodramatic in the original film, and that's not a bad thing at all. And it works there and it works here. I love this scene. I love that she survives. It's heightened. It's beautiful. And it's also, it makes sense thematically. You know, Shikishima has worked so hard to forgive himself and to make amends for what he feels he's done wrong. For the movie to end with him still being punished with Noriko's death does not work. He needs to have this, and he earns it. It's one of the only instances in a movie where they save a character from what is definitely a death, and it works because the characters earn it so much. When you think about writing story, like Robert Marquis puts it best, when a story ends, everybody has to be fundamentally changed, and death is a very good way to do that, because you can kill a character off and they can't undo the character's death, and therefore that is a fundamental change to the core of the world at hand that is so big that it has changed everything moving forward. If you save a character, you don't have something that gravitational occur in the script, but this movie shows everybody is so profoundly changed before she's shown to be alive that the reveal she's alive doesn't undercut the change that has occurred with the characters and the story. It is so solid. I love it. It is such an earned happy ending. As the movie ends, we get the Godzilla shot. Now, I can't help but feel this was only added because Toho has a mandate that you can't officially kill Godzilla off without either reviving him or having a second Godzilla be born, which I might have preferred, but given that we're getting a sequel to this movie, this is okay. If we weren't getting a sequel to this, I would have preferred the reveal that there is a different Godzilla that has come into existence, because who knows what that one will be like. That one could be a little more neutral. It could even be a good guy. Who knows? I like the idea that there's always a Godzilla. I get what Toho's going for. I get that they don't want Godzilla permanently killed off, but I cannot help but feel it is a little underwhelming in a way, or maybe even just that it's a little too similar to GMK's ending with the heart, which picks up beating again as Godzilla's gonna regenerate and live again. But we cut to the ocean and we see all of the chunks of Godzilla, all the remains sinking into the sea, and they begin to reanimate. The core of Godzilla is alive. It begins regenerating. He will return. And that is where the movie ends. I love it. I love it, love it. And then the very, very ending, as the end credits are finishing up, we hear that iconic footsteps and Godzilla roar, which starts the 54 film. Obviously, this one's the -1 version of that, but I think that's great as well. Also ties into the whole Godzilla 0 thing. Like, we've arrived at the start of the first movie in a weird way. Obviously not canonically, but you get what I'm saying. Like I said earlier, the only thing in this whole movie I would want is more. I love the characters, I love the world, I love the story, I love it all, and I would have liked more. I would have loved a longer Godzilla destruction scene in Ginza in particular, because the trailers were very heavy on that, so it did spoil a little bit too much of it. And also because it's just great. I love the destruction scene. It's a fantastic one. I love that it finally lets Godzilla like go all out again. It's been a long time since we've seen Godzilla care. Like, a lot of the Heisei movies, Godzilla just kind of walks and destruction happens around him as he's walking. He has characterization in context of his fights with other kaiju, but not in context of his destructive ways, other than in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. The Millennium series is kind of hit or miss on that front. Sometimes they do a really good job with it, other times I don't think they do nearly as good of a job with it. But in particular, like Shin Godzilla, I love the movie, and I love Godzilla's big rampage, but he only walks. He has like almost no motive. There's nothing, no characterization there behind Godzilla's eyes. And that's kind of the way it was in some of the Showa films as well. This is one of those cases where Godzilla's going out of his way to destroy things. He's going out of his way to stop and attack the train, to stop and attack the Nippon Gekijo Theater. He goes out of his way to tail swipes through the streets. You know, there's malice behind his decisions, and he's working for it. I like that he actually has to fight to destroy the theater, you know? One of the other benefits of having a smaller Godzilla makes the destruction a little more engaging. It's only that the destruction scene in Tokyo in the 1954 film lasts for such a long time and destroys Tokyo so thoroughly, going through so many major districts, and this movie really only goes through 1 or 2 major districts, that I would have loved that scene to be longer. But that's, again, that's not where the core of this movie was. The core wasn't on the destruction, the core was on the characters and the story, and so it's okay that it wasn't longer. Again, same deal. I would have liked more of the real world history to be played with. I would have loved more analysis of how the US and the occupational forces would have responded to Godzilla. I would have liked that. I didn't need it, and I do not need it. I would have liked it. Those are the reasons that back when this movie came out for the first time, I rated it a 9 out of 10, saying that it didn't do anything that blew me away in a way where I couldn't have seen it coming. And really what I think I was trying to say was that I would have liked more in some regards, because I had built up an expectation of what this movie was going for, rather than immediately identifying what it was. And having identified what it truly is, a core personal story about someone overcoming their personal demons and grief, I'm so fine with it. It's such a perfect movie. I think this truly is the perfect Godzilla movie. It's the best elements of the series all done in one film, all done to its best. Of course, the only other thing you could do is a monster versus monster fight, but that wasn't core to what Godzilla is originally, and it clearly doesn't need to be core to who Godzilla is. Shin Godzilla, Godzilla Minus One, Godzilla 84, Godzilla 54 all prove you do not need another monster to have an interesting movie. Sometimes Godzilla movies are actually more interesting before the enemy monster even shows up. So you don't need a big Godzilla versus film to have it be an engaging Godzilla movie, and this is a perfect example of that, because this is a perfect Godzilla movie. It's every element that I love in Godzilla films all done to its best. The human story is an absolute 10 out of 10. I know that this is going to be a hot take. Other than Serizawa, this is by far better than the original movie. I think every single character, even the side characters, shine so much here. It's got fantastic themes about trauma and guilt. It's got amazing core dynamics, the friendship on display, everybody working together, all of the way everybody relates to one another is so interesting and compelling. The original movie has a great core theme, but it's the theme that makes the human story interesting. All of the themes in that original movie are what elevate that human story. This human story is elevated and the themes help it. This human story doesn't need the themes, but it benefits from them for sure. I don't think anything will ever come close to the true power of Dr. Serizawa, to his character arc in the 1954 film, to that movie's core message, because that movie was so closely connected to the history it was basing itself on. But given that context, and given a lot of the contexts around that movie, this movie does it better than any other. The kaiju story is amazing. I think that this is the best Godzilla we've ever seen. It's my favorite Godzilla design. It's all of the elements of the Heisei Godzilla that I love, amplified and scarier. It's the classic Godzilla design, modernized. He looks fantastic. I love the color of him, the kind of brownish hues on him. I love the sharpness of him. I love all of him. I love how large the spines are. He's so cool in this movie. It's so great. Godzilla's characterization is fantastic as well. Godzilla's got a great character. Earlier in the movie, like I said with that Godzilla sword, you get the impression he's not a bad guy. You kind of get the impression Godzilla's just a territorial defensive animal. He becomes a monster and goes on a vengeance quest. Godzilla's got his own motives going on here. Godzilla's out for blood. He attacks Ginza and he's trying to transform it into his own territory. Essentially, Godzilla's taking out all the buildings, making it a little more like what he wants it to be like, but he's not doing it necessarily evilly. I mean, there is some malice to him. He's going out of his way to chase certain people and to smash the buildings with his tail and stuff. To Godzilla, it does feel like this is a holy quest to transform the city back into what he wants, given that humanity has attacked him in such a vicious, brutal way. But then Godzilla claims the territory as his own and heads out. It's not like Godzilla's here to destroy the whole world. Once Godzilla's got Tokyo, we find out that he's added it to his territory and he's gonna keep coming back to Tokyo. Who knows what he would do from there? Would he continue to try and expand his territory out? I guess we'll see in a sequel if they unpack that. I don't know. But I like that Godzilla's finally got things going on for him again. And I should specify, like, the Toho Godzilla. The MonsterVerse Godzilla's always got things going on for him. It's just a matter of if they're consistent with the things that were going on with him in the film beforehand, you know? I also love the origin. I love the Godzilla sword. I love the mythology of it. I love the stakes with Godzilla. I love that he's not overpowered. Thank God, I'm so done with overpowered Godzillas. I don't find them interesting or compelling. I also love the scale. I love that he's back down to 50.1 meters. He's in his Showa size. Godzilla feels smaller and more tangible as a result. I love it. The special effects, these are Oscar winning. It's the first Godzilla film to ever win an Oscar, and they're fantastic. For a budget of less than $15 million, somewhere more around the $10 million range, it looks amazing. Post-war Japan looks amazing. There are some shots where, like, Noriko's on the train and the buildings are out the window. You couldn't tell that that's all just CGI out the window. You couldn't tell. It looks real, and that's not what Tokyo looks like in real life. It looks nothing like that. None of the areas seen in this movie still look the way they do in this movie in real life. None of them look like that anymore. The closest we get is the Ginza Waco building, the clock tower, but even that is so surrounded by other things that are so futuristic that it loses the context it has here. And even in the movie, they've decorated it to look different. Everything in this movie looks fantastic. Godzilla looks amazing. I love the way he moves. I love that Godzilla moves in a way that's like, you can tell it's hard for Godzilla to exist on land. He moves pretty smoothly in the ocean, and once he gets on land, it's a struggle. And it's not the way he moves when he's small. He moves much faster and more fluid when he's small. It's clearly an intentional choice. Also, if you look at the way that Godzilla the Ride moves, as well as the way that this Godzilla moves in the big 70th anniversary short film Toho released, Godzilla Minus One moves much more smoothly there, much more fluidly, which I know is some people's complaint that Godzilla moves really clunky in this movie. I think it's intentional. I think it's to show how heavy he is, how hard it is for him to move in his big heightened state. I think it's fantastic. I love it. And the special effects are so amazing. The CGI is amazing. All of it's amazing. The music is perfect. Naoki Sato's soundtrack is incredible. What a peak score. The ethereal music is already one thing. Divine is some of the best music we've ever heard in a Godzilla film. It captures the power and ferocity of Godzilla so well. Resolution captures that conflict between humanity and Godzilla better than maybe any other song. And the Ifukube music is used so well here. Does it feel slightly out of place? Slightly, I guess so. But what I love about it is that when it kicks on, it's unmistakably Godzilla to the core. And this is the core Godzilla movie. It is everything I love about Godzilla done so well. And it's not done because then there's Godzilla Minus One minus color. A beautiful reimagining of this movie with just incredible detail put into it. It's not just a black and white version. They've colored every single frame differently. You know, they've worked intentionally to make sure each frame works as intended. They've brought out the brightness in the eyes. Someone had to mask out characters' eyes to bring out the brightness in them so they didn't get lost in the contrast. Someone had to work on the skin tones to make sure the faces didn't get lost in the contrast. They've added a subtle film grain, a subtle film shake, a subtle vintageness to it that first of all adds a more documentary-like feel to it, ties it back to wartime footage, makes it feel more real, like it's an actual thing that actually happened, makes it more believable as a result, and ties it back more into the period aesthetic of this movie, while also connecting it back to the original 1954 film, which this is not a remake of, but a reimagining of. I love it. I love that this movie, first of all, isn't a remake of the original movie, it's its own story, but that it's so associated with that movie and so connected to it and so loving of that story. And the black and white version is a great way to achieve an even stronger impression of that. It's incredibly well done. Godzilla Minus One Minus Color is the definitive Godzilla movie. I think that the original will always be Godzilla at his core, and that will always be the movie I would recommend people to watch. Absolutely. If you're gonna have to only watch one Godzilla movie, it might as well be the original. But if I'm gonna tell somebody to start with a Godzilla movie, it will be Godzilla Minus One. Probably honestly won't tell them to start with Minus Color, but if they want a Godzilla movie that feels a little more closer to the core of Godzilla, to his history, go for the Minus Color version. Otherwise, this is the Godzilla film. It does the human stories better than ever. It captures all of the themes throughout the Godzilla series, you know, the themes about the horrors of war, the themes about the atomic bomb, the things about all that made Godzilla special. It's all present here. The atomic bomb isn't unpacked as heavily as it was in the 1954 film, but that's because this film has other things to explore. This is the Godzilla movie, and over time, since this movie's release, it has become my favorite Godzilla movie ever. I love it. It's perfect. I think it's a perfect film. This is very close to the Godzilla movie I've always wanted to see and the Godzilla movie I wanted to make, which there was a weird experience watching this movie, kind of realizing that the dream I had of making a Godzilla movie of my own has got to change, because the Godzilla movie I wanted to make has essentially been made. Although I never pictured it as a period piece, this very much touches on almost all of the ideas I wanted to do in my own Godzilla movie someday. So it was a weird experience, but also a very exciting experience for that reason. I am so happy to give Godzilla Minus One a 10 out of 10. This movie has aged so well, like I said at the top. It's the only Godzilla film I haven't found myself getting burned out on yet. I love it. I love the visuals, I love the color, I love the music, I love the characters, I love the story, I love Godzilla in it. It's everything I want. And when people ask, like, what do I love about Godzilla? This Godzilla represents all of it. This Godzilla behaves the way I picture Godzilla behaving. He is fantastic, even with his own level of tragedy, which is an essential element for Godzilla. It's one of those things that the MonsterVerse never has truly included. Is it sad that he's the last of his kind? I don't know. Is he even the last of his kind, or is he the first of his kind? They can't even commit to that. I like that this movie adds in that tragedy to Godzilla again. And I like that this movie takes a little more risks tying him back to his atomic allegories, when it's kind of seen as a little scary to do so nowadays. You know, like they call Godzilla's atomic breath the heat ray now. Whatever. My point is, this movie is fantastic. It's all of the things I love about Godzilla done incredibly well. I could not recommend this movie more. 10 out of 10. My favorite Godzilla movie to date, and I'm very happy to keep spending time with it. I love this film, and I will continue to love this film, and I cannot wait to watch it again. There is another version of Godzilla Minus One, and it's the English dub. It was first released on Netflix. It's also on the DVDs. I watched it again for this review. It's the first time I've watched the English dub since it came out, and I still stand by my opinion. I'm happy that an English version of this movie exists. I do not think it detracts from the movie all that much. I like it. I like it a lot because it opens the accessibility of this film so much to people who either cannot read subtitles or absolutely downright refuse to, and I understand you can be pretentious about that, like, well, if they refuse to read subtitles, they don't deserve this movie. Shut up. Let this movie expand to people beyond yourself. Don't gatekeep. Gatekeeping's for losers, and I don't think you're a loser. This movie, I'm glad that it can be seen by all and appreciated by all. I love the dub. I love that it exists. It's a very, very well done one as well. The voice acting is all incredibly well done. It does, I would say, lean more into the melodrama, especially with the actor who plays Shikishima and the actress who plays Noriko. They lean very heavily into the melodrama, but they're not terribly far off from the performances of the original. I do not think it holds a candle to the Japanese version for a couple reasons. Number one, Japanese is just the definitive Godzilla language, of course, after all this time. It's the language this movie was meant to be seen in. The actors' performances are incredible in the Japanese version, and the English version does not capture the full gravity or range of those performances. And there is something very special about seeing this movie with the Japanese and reading it with subtitles that builds it into the atmosphere of it being the definitive Godzilla movie. But the English dub, very well produced. The sound mixing is fantastic. They do a great job with the sound mix. I was really impressed at one scene when Akiko's crying and then the human characters are talking over her. Like, that's clearly a decision where they've had all the characters' dialogues laid out on different soundtracks, benefit of the the modern day editing system, and so they can choose which dialogue to keep and which dialogue to replace because Shikishima's talking in English over the actual Japanese Akiko baby. Pretty impressive, but overall, fairly well written, only minor script changes. It does include one change that I like for the better, which is the change that Tachibana puts in. He installs the ejector seat mechanism into the Shinden. He doesn't just repair it, he actually is the one who includes it for the sole purpose of saving Shikishima's life, whereas in the Japanese version, it'd be really kind of messed up if he didn't repair that seat and tell Shikishima about it. It would make Tachibana a downright villain. In the English cut, it makes him even more heroic because he's added in this thing before he even learns that Shikishima has truly changed and redeemed himself. Before he even learns that, he's already made the decision to save his life. Other than that, you know, like, people were crying about the final line being slightly different with, "Is your war finally over?" to "Shikishima, is this war of yours finally over?" I don't care. It's about the same line anyways. Subtitling's already a subjective art form, so it would have been translated different if Anthony Kim was not the one doing the subtitles for -1 in the first place. I'm totally fine with it. I'm totally fine with the English dub, totally fine with the small dialogue changes. I think on the whole it works really, really well. I think mostly the voice actors are cast well, and the ones that aren't cast perfectly aren't cast poorly, which is a big distinction. There are some voice actors I think that are slightly off, but I don't think they're really distracting at all. I think they all do a great job. Whereas like Shin Godzilla's English dub, I didn't think turned out as well. I thought the sound mix was nowhere near as convincing, and I felt like the voice actor for Rando Yaguchi was distractingly bad. I thought it was a distractingly bad pick. It just, the voice did not match the character. Not a bad voice job or voice acting job, just a miscast, and this movie does not have that. I know, kind of a hot take to praise the English dub so much, but I really like the English dub as well, and I'm glad we're beyond the era of English dubs heavily re-editing the movies as well. Like, glad that it's just the Japanese movie with English dialogue, as it should be. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed. I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. It is through the support of the patrons on Patreon that I'm able to continue to make videos like this for you. If you want to support the Patreon, you can use the link in the description below where you can get early access to content, access to the Discord community, and more. If that's not your thing, please consider joining as a channel member. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you guys all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you all next time for the next one. D-Man